Welcome to the Memories of a Moonbird podcast, exploring life one story at a time. Hello friends, I'm Daniel Scherl. Today on the show, for over 30 years, you've seen and heard him in almost every form of media you can imagine. Film, television, theater, video games, radio, magazines, the internet. He's that guy. He's been in movies and TV shows like Star Trek Discovery, Straight Outta Compton, Argo, Mad Men, Castle, Criminal Minds, Bosch, Grey's Anatomy, Breaking Bad, and many, many others. Not to mention more than 100 national commercials for the biggest brands in the world like Capital One, Dell, FedEx, Audi, Marriott, Heineken, Quickbooks, State Farm, and Coca-Cola, just to name a few. But in addition to his incredible career, he's also one of the most renowned acting teachers in Los Angeles and a man with a fascinating life story. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to the show my friend, Mr. Rob Brownstein. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for that amazing introduction. I don't know how renowned I am, but I'll take it.
I'm going to say you're renowned.
There we go. Remember, renowned in some of the places we don't want to be known in is, I think, the truth.
So right off the bat, I know you were born in Vietnam, correct?
Yep.
So what's the story there? What brought your family there, and what was it like for you living abroad?
I think, first of all, if we remember in history, during the 50s and the late 50s, during Eisenhower and post the Second World War, that was when we were going all over the world to do development and to help out.
Sure.
The Peace Corps hadn't started because I was started by Kennedy. So my dad was working for the U.S. government, but he was doing training programs. He was teaching agricultural programs. That was his business, was training programs. And my mom was teaching English as a second language. She had her master's in sociology from Michigan State, and they met there. One thing led to another, and there I was.
How long were you guys in Vietnam?
We were there for 18 months.
So you remember it vividly.
You know what? The amazing thing is I actually have a couple of images which were confirmed by my parents as being sort of the real deal. But the funny thing is those couple of images were from ground level. Like I remember I was sort of describing this view I had sort of out our door, and my parents were like really confused until they figure out it was ground level. So we were there for 18 months because America went to Vietnam after the French left in 1954. Then we were going to go to war. So they called my dad in and said, dude, you got to hit the road, man. We're not doing development anymore. We're going to war. So we spent, I think, another 18 months in Laos and in Thailand, sort of in the middle, in the Far East, and then came back to the States, to Washington, D.C. for a few years. And then my dad got another contract and we went to the Ivory Coast, where we spent a couple of years. And then, that was sort of my life for a while, these international contracts.
And at what age did you guys kind of settle in the United States?
Well, we settled in New York. And that happened after the Ivory Coast. There was Florence, Italy, and then New York. And then my parents divorced. So when my dad went to Ethiopia, when I was in middle school, I went with him, but I was also going back and forth, and my mom was staying in New York. So New York became the home base.
That's quite a culture change between Ethiopia and New York at such a young age. I mean, that's also it's an impressionable age. What an incredible thing to experience the international community so young.
Yeah. Through the miracle of Facebook, I'm actually in touch with a lot of those people.
Oh, wow.
And it's pretty funny. In fact, we were just yesterday sharing some pictures, from those days. But I mean, to be honest with you, I think that we would not be so screwed up if we traveled. I think one of the biggest, problems that this country has is just that people don't travel. They live in their little worlds and they listen to their fake news and, their insular news. And so then they just become so insular that they don't get other perspectives. And I think that if we did, we'd have a very, very different attitude, which is why in some ways, I'm not saying that Europe, or Australia or New Zealand are any less screwed up in general than we are as a people. But as cultures, they're not, because they do understand that there is the rest of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't, sort of inoculate them. I mean, look at Brexit.
Yeah.
Another really, really smart idea. But it does, these are people who live in the world. These are people who take vacations. They go places. Most of my friends who are European, by the time they're like 24, they've been to several different countries, taken vacations, done this, done that. Most Americans by the time they're 24 have just graduated college and maybe had a spring break.
Yeah.
So,
and also Americans, they don't understand that going to Florida to Disneyland or going to Cancun for a party weekend is not traveling. It's not. Yeah. Well, I understand you also grew up with one biological sibling, and then you have adopted siblings from different races. And I was wondering, what was that experience like? Because you've not only been exposed to different cultures of the world growing up, but now your siblings are from different parts of the world.
My parents were incredibly well-meaning people. And, my mom was just amazingly liberal, marched for Kennedy, all of those things, I actually come from a very interesting family, sort of a long line of lefties. My grandfather was one of the original peaceful Italian anarchists. He knew Sacco and Vanzetti and Emma Goldman, and all those incredible people were regulars in their home. And
Wow.
My grandmother was one of 7 sisters, and, one sister was best friends with Margaret Mead. It just quite an incredible family and history going really up to this generation. So they were incredibly well-meaning people. And, we were living in the Ivory Coast, and they adopted my one brother, Richard, in the Ivory Coast. And, the only problem was that therapy wasn't a big deal at the time. Working with kids to kind of work out a lot of these issues coming from an orphanage was not a thing. And then, of course, my parents ended up getting divorced. So when we moved back to the States, my brother, who had never experienced racism, now had to deal with racism.
Oh, wow.
Which unfortunately broke him. It changed him and hurt him a ton. It just was really difficult. And, we grew up in a neighborhood in New York, after my parents divorced. My mom moved out to Queens, to teach school. We just lived in a neighborhood that was, very working class, very, it was like the Jets and the Sharks. There was the 78th Street gang that we were junior members of because that was our park, the 78th Street Park gang. And then there was the 81st Street Park gang that were our mortal enemies for reasons that I never understood other than they were just a park down the street. So there was always that. But, the people grew out of it. The older gang members, they got married, they had kids, they kind of grew out of it. But Rich, because of all the shit that had gone down, he never quite left and had a lot of trouble as a young adult because of that. But, it was a world that had, as far as he could tell, abandoned him. And he was pissed off. So, I don't blame him, but it was difficult, really difficult for him. And so that's my older brother. And then I have a younger brother who's a half brother, and he and I share the same dad. And my older brother, Rich, passed away from illness a while ago. But David is working for the State Department. He's right now the deputy liaison, I think, to Syria.
Wow.
Is what his title is.
That's crazy. Well, maybe we'll get him on the show at some point and talk to him about his life.
You just got to keep him in this country to get him on. He's always going back and forth. And
with Zoom, we talk to other countries.
That's true.
What was little Rob like as a child when you were a little boy? What were you into?
Reading. I read everything. And I was always into sports, always into sports. And then in middle school.
What's your favorite sport to play?
Well, I'm of an age now where I can't play anything really well.
Well, back in the day, what was your favorite sport?
I was never very good at baseball. I will say that. I was cool with softball, but when we graduated to hardball and I was playing second base and that first line drive went whizzing past my head and I saw my life flash before my eyes and moved out to the outfield. That was sort of it for baseball.
I'm terrible at basketball, if it makes you feel any better.
Basketball, I was good at.
I'm terrible at basketball.
I loved playing basketball, and we had that park right across the street, so I played basketball all the time. We played soccer. I also went to a lycée when I was overseas, so I played soccer, which I loved, European handball. So, I love bowling. My dad, went into business sort of in between all his things, and one of his businesses was owning a bowling alley.
Oh, cool.
We were there all the time. So, I still can bowl, even though I don't.
I was gonna say bowling you can still do today. Yeah, yeah.
But I play basketball with my daughter all the time.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. And a great lead into my next question, which is I know for a fact as your friend that you didn't have a great relationship with your own father. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what happened there.
I don't know, man. What can we say on the podcast?
You can say whatever you want.
Well, he was a dick. He was a narcissist. And while on the one hand, he was incredibly charming and definitely introduced me to the arts and so many cool things, he was also sort of a bit of a traditional Jewish dad. We rule the house with an iron fist. Everything is what I say. So growing up in the 60s and 70s, man, that shit wasn't going to fly.
Yeah.
So we had those issues. And as he got older and older, he was less and less willing to sort of let go of things. He was more willing to let the relationships with his children suffer than let go of some of his bullshit, so to speak. And so that was kind of the deal. But he was actually an extraordinary man. All that aside, he came from a real working class family in South Philadelphia. His father owned a candy store. His father died when he was 20. He became one of the top one of the sort of 150 top international executives.
Wow.
For a while, and then owned some businesses, and he was quite an interesting man.
Well, I have a question about that. Do you feel that by today's standards, if your dad, if this had been happening today, that people would say, "Oh yeah, your father was abusive"?
Yes.
So then over the years of your life and whatever conversations you've had and therapy or whatever, as you process these things, is it easier for you as a human being to look back and say, well, I know my dad did these things and he was all this, but I can look at his life and what happened to him and losing his father and his struggles and the era in which he was raised?
The answer to that question, the answer to that question is yes, but it doesn't excuse anything.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, my attitude about life is, from having had a difficult childhood is, up until you're 18, it's all their fault. After that, it's your fault. He had plenty of opportunities to figure himself out and deal with his anger issues. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, listen, I grew up in a time where hitting your kids was a thing. People did it.
Yeah.
It ranged from whatever spanking or whatever, but it was never okay to hit your wife.
No.
So it didn't happen a lot, but my dad had anger issues and it happened a couple of times. And so she left. And then, there was a day, make a great short film. It was a day when I was 13 where my dad was angry about something I did and, took me out in the parking lot of the bowling alley restaurant and was going to say, well, now you're a grown up. You can defy me. Now, you'll be punished like a grown up. Put up your fists.
Wow.
And I mean, so Robert Duvall, you know what I mean? It was just so,
yeah.
And I remember like one of his partners came out like, Arnold, no, what are you doing? And, I was like, I'm not going to fight you. I'm not going to hit you. I'm not going to. So he did that thing that grown-ups do with kids, that open-handed little nudge bitch slap, to sort of get you, and I don't know what happened, man, because I was like, nope, I'm not going to raise my hands. I'm not going to do anything. I don't know. He caught me, surprised me. And before I knew what I'd done, I hauled off and slugged him in the stomach and he went down on his knees. I mean, completely shocked the shit out of him. And it was like dead silence. Everybody was like, he got up, walked away, never touched me again, and never touched anybody else in the family because things had changed.
Was there any kind of reconciliation with him before he died, or did it all
No, I can't say that there was reconciliation, no, because, he'd made his choices and,
yeah.
And so, we made ours, my sister and I, and that was that.
Well, for people out there who are listening to the show that might have a situation similar to yours, I'm curious, A, how that situation affected you as a father and what good things you brought, and two, what advice you would give to anyone else who might be in a similar situation.
Here's the thing. I had this discussion with my dad. When I was in college, I took some time off. He opened up a restaurant and helped him work. And we had this conversation once during some argument we had, which was, and he was just, I'm your father. You have to respect me. And I'm like, no, Dad, you're my father and I love you, but you have to earn my respect. Mm-hmm. It doesn't come, just because of the title. And I think that people change, people grow. Your family is who they are. I think it's incredibly difficult sometimes to deal with who they are, but I think a lot of people put up with their families a lot more than they should. I think it's okay to say, you know what? This is not good for me. This
Hmm.
is not a good relationship for me. Doesn't mean I don't love you, but I can't have you around. I can't have you in my life. I can't go home for Christmas, whatever it takes. So I think that's advice that I would give to people. I mean, I think at some point you have to take care of yourself. I certainly went to therapy, to deal with a lot of these things. And you become a grown up. You become your own adult, and you make your own choices in life. And I think that sometimes that means that these people, whether it be family or what I always called friends of circumstance, people you grew up with, people you worked on a show with, people you worked in I had a job with, you know what I mean? Not people you went and chose, but people who were just sort of part of your life.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just cease to be positive forces in your life. And I think
Hmm.
it's hard to do, but sometimes you have to make those choices. And how did it affect me as a parent? You create your own world. That I create that I'm me, and I'm going to be the parent that I'm going to be, and then I'm not going to be some other parent, that I'm not going to repeat those things. And then through the miracle of acting, I sort of, work through a ton of other personal
Well,
issues.
let's talk about the acting. When did you first become interested in acting?
Well, here's the deal. I was always escaping into books and stories and movies and plays. Storytelling just was everything to me. So when I was in middle school, I started doing poetry readings, like not like slam poetry like we do now. These were presented by the school. They were visiting dignitaries. It was a big deal.
That's cool.
They ended up realizing that I, could be funny. So I sort of became like this, one of the younger people, but I do these comedic poems in French because I was going to a lycée at the time.
Oh, wow. Wait, how many languages do you speak?
I speak three now. There was a time when I spoke more Spanish, French, and English. I used to speak Italian, but I haven't done that in, so many years that even though I can understand it, but basically I end up speaking Spanish with an Italian accent. And then having lived in Ethiopia, I could speak Amharic pretty well. Now I can just remember a few words, but I could curse in about 30 different languages.
So why do you act? Why not some other job?
Sometimes life just happens, man. I intended to be a writer. Then in high school, I kind of fell in love with music, and my best friends had a rock band, and so became the rhythm guitarist in the rock band. And so then I moved on to jazz, which I'd always listened to but never played. So when I went to college, my first major was writing, but I took acting classes, and then my second major was music. And then sort of music kind of took over a little bit. And then one summer, after the summer, I went back to school, and New York City had gone bankrupt that summer. I was going to a city university, and the way that the music department had handled the bankruptcy was to get rid of the jazz department. So all of a sudden, I had no major. I didn't know what to do.
Oh, that sucks.
So I had to walk through the drama building to get back to the bus to go home. This is New York. This is not, LA. You take buses, And I'm going through the drama building, and they were auditioning for The Time of Your Life. I didn't want to go home. I had nowhere to go. So I said, could I audition? They looked at me. They didn't know who I was. They thought I was crazy. But, they said yes, because that's what you got to do. And they said, but you got to wait till the end. So I just sat for like 2 hours and waited. And then I auditioned for Joe, who is the lead. I was absolutely terrible. But I walked out of there and I thought, you know what? Maybe I'll do this for a major. And I walked over to the payphone,
Payphone, yeah.
and called my dad and said, listen, here's what happened. I don't have a major anymore. I'm thinking of switching to drama. But in order to do that, I have to quit my job because I was studying during the day, and had a job at night. I have to quit my job because I have to do plays at night, take classes during the day. Can I move in with you? And he was like, okay. So that's how I became an actor.
In all the years and the incredible amount of roles you've had, what is the most challenging character you've ever played?
The hardest role I ever played was very early in my career, and that's why it was so hard. If I had the knowledge I had now, it wouldn't be so hard, But later on, as I learned to be better as an actor, I was doing a play. It was Emlyn Williams' Night Must Fall, which is a babyface killer play. and I was playing the babyface killer, but it's Welsh, which is an incredibly difficult accent,
Yeah.
incredibly, and I just struggled and struggled and struggled. It was one of my first like really big. I'd had big roles in college, but it wasn't the same. This one I really struggled with the tapes and the accent and finding the character and because he's delightful in the romantic lead and then he turns into the killer. And I remember one day came to rehearsal and the director and the assistant director had called us all together and they were going to cancel the show. They just didn't feel like we were getting it. And everybody was like, what? Oh, God. And I stood up and I said, no, don't do that. And they looked at me and I'm like, we got 2 weeks till we go. Man, I've been many shows in college that were in worse shape than this with 2 weeks to go. We can absolutely do it. And the director said, well, you're the lead. And I said, yeah. She said, it's all on your shoulders. And she got up and walked out. And I was like, holy shit. And everybody looked at me and I looked at them and they looked at me and I went, all right. So literally, I remember going home and I think for the rest of the week, I didn't sleep. I was up at night doing homework, going through everything, man, making notebooks, working on the accent, you name it. And we opened and the show was really good.
Do you think it's fair to say after all these years that you love acting?
I do. I love it. I do. I really love acting. I love actors. I love the storytelling. I love how hard it is. I love.
Well, and is your love for it why you decided to teach?
Yeah. I decided to teach essentially. I've always taught, honestly. I come from a family of teachers. The two family businesses are either teaching or foreign service.
Well, what's your favorite part of teaching? Is there one thing that stands out above
man.
all others?
My favorite part of teaching is when the light bulb goes off in an actor's face. When the light bulb goes off, when an actor does a piece of work that is black belt, that is fantastic. The other favorite part of teaching is getting that phone call, when I've worked with somebody or coached them, I booked it. Yeah. I booked it. Man, the pleasure in the voice and the accomplishment, it's not easy. Everybody knows the cliche of what a difficult career it is and this and that and the other. But to stick with it and to accomplish it and to become a true professional, and for me to help as a teacher, for them to get there is, it's great, man. It's giving back. I'm curious,
did you ever consider quitting the entertainment business? And if yes, what kept you going?
Well, I think I would be human if I didn't consider quitting. One of the hardest parts of being an actor, which is not the same for everybody, but for some people, is, relationships and people around you who want you to get a steady job and stop being an actor. And I had a couple of those. And so, yes, there were a few moments. Yeah.
What kept you going? What made you want to persevere?
I'm just too fucking stubborn to quit. And the other thing is I just don't like to quit on a loss,
Yeah, for sure.
I want to be like, Peyton Manning. I want to win the Super Bowl and then quit.
But there's a lot of people out there that would look at your career and say, you've had an incredible career. You're still, if you went out right now and decided to stop, you're on pretty good high,
I would be, I'm proud of my career, I guess is what I want to say. And the struggle to make it happen. The other thing is I didn't come out here to do television until I was in my late 30s, which is, supposedly you're not supposed to be able to do that. So you beat the odds. And I think that's just because I'm bitchingly stubborn. I am just so stubborn. There's bad stubbornness and there's good stubbornness. And,
yeah.
I have both, but I have a lot of that good stubbornness because, you got to keep showing up in life. That's the thing. You got to keep showing up and you got to keep learning. And the other thing I've learned is to do what you love.
Amen.
Because life is too short. There's an awful lot of sacrifice you have to make no matter what you choose to do. And do what you love, man. Even if you have to have a day job. Try to live a life where you like what you're doing. And I think that if we did that, we would have so many less of the problems we have in this country.
I 100% agree with you.
Life has value. And the value is so way beyond just financial or, material. It has value in terms of just peace of mind and love and enjoyment.
Well,
And
you mentioned something very important, and that is, if you're not doing something you love, why not do that? And I hear a lot of people say, like, well, I don't have a choice. That is an excuse. I'm
yeah,
not
I
saying
agree.
it's going to be an easy road, but you have choices, and you can learn a new career. You can go to night school. You can do whatever you got to do, and you can make a change, even if it takes time. But you can do it.
It's funny. I have a neighbor who lives down the street, and we talk all the time. We're walking our dogs. He's a waiter, but he loves being a waiter. He loves his job. He loves his restaurant. He loves meeting people. He loves it. And, I say a waiter, and most people are like, oh, being a waiter, blah, blah. Man, he loves it. And he's got his house there, his kids, and he's a very happy man. So it's not what you do, it's how you feel about what you do.
Agreed. Very well said. I'm curious, from the moment you get an audition and then you actually do the audition, and then let's say you book the job, and then you go to a fitting, and then you go to set and you shoot, and then you see the final product. Is there a part of that process as an actor that you like more than the others?
Well, they're different. But the audition, especially now that we're doing self tapes, it's an audition that's based on your take and your feelings about, what you think the character is and what the scene is and all that. And, what you interpret that the writer has written for you to do. And the casting director gives you a breakdown, an idea. So there's that. And that's a skill and a thing in itself. And then, of course, if you book it, then you show up and it's like you start brand new. They're both fantastic. You have to love the audition. I know some people hate auditions, but if you can love the audition, then you have a chance to book. I think you're going to work more. But the
Yeah.
other part is also recognizing once you show up on work, it's all brand new. It all starts from scratch all over again. And that's a beauty of that too. And it's hard to teach that because so many people, so many young actors, are always looking at the script and, what is the one solution? Well, there is no one solution. So to me, it's the mystery of all of that collaboration of talent and art that, I love about it.
As an industry veteran and teacher and father, have you ever felt like you have this whole thing in life figured out, life, career, family?
Never, never, man. Anybody who thinks they have life figured out is a sucker. Man, I have, during this pandemic, we can't go anywhere. I've had so much life lived in the last year, curves, things with my kids, this and that. And the other. It's just crazy, man. No, you can't figure anything out.
Is there anything specific you still feel driven to achieve as an actor?
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to be able to work on a series for a couple of seasons. I've had recurring roles and stuff, but I would love to be able to work on a character and develop it. I've really loved that process when I've had recurring roles and, the writers start adapting to you and all of, and it becomes a collaborative
process.
Way.
Yeah.
I would love to be able to explore that, over the course of a couple of seasons. And that would be lovely.
Well, here's probably the most important question of the entire podcast.
Here we go. Finally, you're throwing me a softball.
Who's your celebrity crush?
Now, I don't have one now.
Okay.
But I did have one for quite a long time. And I will tell you, I actually was in a coffee shop with her. It was just the two of us. There was nobody else in the coffee shop. She was sitting at a table over there, and I was sitting at a table over here. And I was sweating. And we smiled across the room. I couldn't go any further.
Oh, man. Who is it? I got to know.
Meg Ryan.
Oh, that's a good one. I like it. She's great.
Yeah.
Well, Meg Ryan, if you ever hear this podcast, your future ex-husband is Rob Brownstein.
Yeah, no, I had such a thing for her because, I'm a softie. I'm a romantic at heart.
Mm.
I totally am. And I believe in romance. So
Me too. Rob, what would be the title of your autobiography?
He showed up.
I like it. Nice and straight and simple. I love it. What was your favorite childhood book, if you had one?
Ooh. My favorite childhood book was either 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, or A Wrinkle in Time.
All excellent choices. Do you remember the first movie you saw that made you cry?
Well, I can tell you, I saw a lot of movies. As many issues as my dad had, we went to a lot of films. We went to the theater, we went to movies. I have to say, it doesn't take a lot to make me cry. I mean, I cried at the end of Avengers Endgame, man. So,
So did I, dude. Yeah.
I know, but I'm just saying.
Well, Rob, as an avid reader, are there any books or a singular book that stands out to you that you think should be mandatory reading for all people on Earth?
I think everybody should read Manchild in the Promised Land. I feel sort of weird saying this, but, because there's so many wonderful, wonderful, wonderful books that have been written recently, about race and all of that. But I remember reading Manchild in the Promised Land when I was, I want to say sixth grade. And I was just stunned and blown away, It was very moving. But nobody even knows this book exists.
Well, they will now because it's on the podcast.
No, I know, but it's a book about someone who survives race and all of that to become successful. I mean, it's sort of like The Art of Happiness. Another book that I wish that everybody would read would be Stand on Zanzibar.
I don't know that one.
He described the world that we're about to get into if we keep going down the path we are. It's quite an extraordinary book. And frankly, any writings of Alan Watts, who wrote about Zen back in the 60s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. If you ever have a chance, not even to read his writings, but he did a series for PBS where he just sat on the hill in Big Sur and just talked about life. And it's quite extraordinary.
Well, how has your focus changed, do you think, in general, just throughout your life? What's different now than when you were 20 and 30 versus 40s, 50s, et cetera?
Oddly enough, I think I'm closer now to where I was in my 20s. In my 20s, I just didn't really think about things that much. I just did them. And, honestly, I didn't even realize, I think in some ways, the idea that I would have talent or I'd be good at something. So I think that where I've kind of come back to now is the, sort of letting go of all of that stuff in between, just come back to having fun doing the work.
Well, besides acting and music, what do you do with your off hours? What are your hobbies?
I read. During the pandemic, I've built a gym.
Ah, cool.
So I work out, I play music, and I'm kind of trying to reteach myself to play the saxophone till I get to the point where I actually won't embarrass myself if I start to take lessons.
And you can go guest play with Alan Wasserman's jazz band.
That's a couple of years away.
Well, I'm curious. Speaking of music, it's 8:00 at night. You have the house to yourself. Kids are gone, and you want to just put some music on and dance around and jam. What song would you put on?
Different things. I'm a little bit eclectic. Last night I put on Runt by Todd Rundgren. The other night we played some Eddie Palmieri, which is pure New York salsa. Could be some Springsteen. Could be some Bowie.
Well, Rob, you can thank Jolene for this question. If you could sit down for 4 hours in an old-timey pub with one person from all of human history, alive or dead, excluding your own family members or any religious prophet, who would you sit down with? What would you drink? And what's the first question you'd ask them?
That's a good one. That's a very good one. Well, I can tell you, the first thing I can tell you is I would be drinking Irish whiskey.
Okay. With whom?
That's a very, very interesting one. I think I'd like to sit with Alan Watts.
So you and Alan Watts are sitting in this pub. There's a couple of Irish whiskeys there in front of you. Uh-huh. You toast and you say, Alan, I have a question. What would it be?
I would say, what did you see that made you know that Zen was the answer?
I would love to hear the answer to that question. That's cool. Rob, if you could travel in time, where would you go and why?
Leonardo da Vinci. I'd want to know what the fuck was going on. I'd love to see what I'd love to sit and chat with him and say, dude, what was going on in your brain, man? What was happening while you were looking at this, sort of medieval world and coming up with all this stuff? That would be immensely cool.
What's your guilty TV pleasure?
I'm a big Laker fan. I pretty much record and watch at least the first and fourth quarters of almost every game, but I don't feel guilty about it. I try to watch a fair amount of stuff. I did watch a thing on Netflix called Cursed, which is about the Lady of the Lake in the era of King Arthur. And I did feel a little guilty about that because it's not that great, but it was fun. But, I think my guilty TV pleasures, man, is watching pulp movies. Like I think most acting teachers that I know would never admit to watching bad movies or bad TV. I'm sorry, man. Sometimes I learn just as much from the bad stuff. And, I'm in this because I thoroughly enjoy this stuff, man. I watched the other day, last night, literally before I went to turn on the Laker game, and Transformers was on. But I watched the last half of Transformers. I watched an hour of Transformers before I turned on the Laker game. That's guilt. That's a guilty pleasure.
What quality do you most admire in human beings?
Openness, love.
Are you afraid of dying?
Yes.
And what would you hope people would say about you at your funeral?
I would really hope that they fucking miss me. That's what I want them to say. Man, we really fucking miss him.
If there is a heaven, and assuming that you're let in, what would you like to hear God say the moment the two of you see each other again?
Well, you made it by the skin of your teeth, didn't you?
Rob Brownstein, what superpower would you choose if you could have one?
I hate that question. My daughter asks me all the time. What superpower would I choose? I don't know. Time travel.
Okay.
Didn't expect that one, did you?
No, but is it time travel where you can change things or time travel where you can only observe?
That is a deep dive into too many science fiction issues, that
we'll leave it for the audience to decide.
That is something for the pub, that conversation.
All right. If you could go back in time to your 16-year-old self and you could talk to him, what would you tell him?
I'd tell him it's going to be okay, because I did not know that at 16.
Rob, what do you think is the purpose of art?
To illuminate the world.
What's your life mission statement?
To matter.
More than you know. I really love that. Yeah. Rob, the last thing we do on the show is a little game I have called 299 Philosophical and Life Questions with Moonbird. I have a list here that I've collected from friends and family of the internet, numbered from 1 to 299. You pick two numbers, and I will read you those two random questions. What are your two numbers?
38.
38 and what?
14.
38 and 14. Okay, number 38, first time being on the show. This is exciting. I love when we get a new question. Would you relocate for love?
No. First of all, with what I do, I can't live anywhere. I kind of have to be here. If we're talking about Santa Barbara, I would consider that. But if it means like severely relocating, at this moment in time, I don't want to live anywhere in this country, but in this city, in this state. Now, New Zealand, someplace in Canada, I'd consider it.
Okay. And you said number 14?
Yeah.
Would you consider yourself to be successful?
Yes. I'm not rich, but I've had a really full life, and I have some great friends. I have absolutely fantastic children who are finding themselves in this incredibly difficult world. And for that alone, I would consider myself successful. I've beaten back the dogs of war to, I don't know, man, to arrive at being okay with who I am and, and life. So,
well, Rob, before we go, let's say 40, 50 years from now, maybe even longer, but after you're gone and your kids are here and they listen to this podcast to hear your voice, what's something you would want to say to them in the future?
Well, I hope you're living in a better world than we are now. I hope that in some way I've done something to make that world better for you. And you kids have given me great joy every second of your lives. And I'm incredibly proud of you, and I love you both.
Do you have any parting advice to actors out there who are just beginning their career or who are maybe feeling a little down about things?
Yeah, man. Get a great teacher. Get somebody you love that makes you feel good, makes you feel happy about acting and about yourself as an actor, and just fall in love with this thing we do, because it's truly wonderful.
Thank you so much for doing this, Rob. I really appreciate your time, and I wish you the best.
Daniel, thanks for asking, man.
We'll have a drink. Alan Watts won't be there, but we'll toast to him in spirit. Friends and listeners, before we go, I have a little surprise to share with you. This is something we did for Rob, and he has no idea that we did this. After we recorded Rob's interview, in the spirit of the film Mr. Holland's Opus, which if you haven't seen, you really should, I secretly reached out to some of Rob's students. They range in age from about 20 to 70 and are a diverse group of actors, some of whom are famous and some who are at the beginning of their careers. I asked them to send me a recording sharing how they feel about Rob as a teacher. And the first student you're going to hear from today is me. I took several of Rob's classes, and to say they changed my life would be an understatement. He's a master of looking at you as a person, cutting through all the nonsense with a surgical precision and telling you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear, all from a place of love and respect. I wouldn't be able to do this show where I speak with and interview people from all around the world on an almost weekly basis if it weren't for the things I learned in Rob's classes. So Rob, a very heartfelt thank you from all of us to you.
I am 100% the actor that I am today because of Rob Brownstein. I owe a whole lot of my career to him.
I am forever grateful to Rob. My acting would not be where it is today if it weren't for him. He's got a real talent. He can quickly and easily cut to the core of what it is you can do to get to the truest and most natural performance.
Rob's the kind of coach who won't let you get away with not owning who you are, which is not only essential for a successful acting career, but also a great life lesson.
Okay, listen, do not study with Rob Brownstein. Just kidding. Please run and study with Rob Brownstein. He has changed my mentality towards acting so much and just made me such a more confident actor and more confident in the work that I'm producing. And I'm so grateful for that, along with the community I've gained. So thank you. I love you, Rob.
The best thing about Rob is that he's not only a terrific actor and a great teacher, he loves teaching and he loves being an actor. And I think that love and dedication to the profession is very inspiring, even to old war horses like yours truly.
A good teacher is one that creates a safe space and where a student can step out and risk and play and not be worried about trying new things. That's the space that Rob creates.
Hey, Rob, you're the greatest. Thanks for everything. I'm so glad for the day that I actually saw that ad and started taking your classes.
Sup, Rob. I'm truly grateful for how you stretch us as artists and not just as actors, because we're all blessed with talents and you don't want to see any of it go to waste. So I love you for that.
I've been in an acting class of one kind or another for over 40 years. I can say without a doubt, Rob Brownstein is the best teacher I have ever had.
Rob is the kind of teacher that sticks to your ribs. The lessons he teaches, the way he shoves with love, the way that he loves and kicks your butt, changes lives. It's changed my life.
Without you, none of us would have the careers we're having now, without your guidance, supervision, and coaching and teaching. And I am one of those lucky few. It's all been an absolute treat, an honor, a gift, a privilege. Eternally grateful.
Hey, Rob, even decades from now, when I think about all the people who really matter to me, your name will come up loud and clear.
Rob, I would say without reservation that you are not just building better actors in your class, you're building better human beings. And you assess people always by what they do, not by what they say. Man, I love celebrating the wins with you, and for disappointments, thank goodness we like the same kinds of whiskey. Everyone's very, very lucky to have you as either a father, a friend, a teacher, and I just hope it's clear how much you matter. I mean, really matter to all of us.